Okay, the broadcast has started, and welcome to the General Class License course. This course is provided by Gordon West, W5YI, and this is the PowerPoint presentation that follows along with the study guide. Let's see. The study guide you should have, if I can find it here, is this one here. This is good until June of 2019. July, it started July 1st of 2015, will run to the end of June of this year. So this course will only be valid until then, when there's only a couple months left. So I hope you have that. And in the book, if you look at the first, on page 2 of the book, I'm going to get you a little bit familiar with the book real quick for those of you who are joining, not able to join live, but for those who will probably view this video at another time. In the book on page 2, it shows the extra privileges that you will gain with a general class license, in addition to what you currently have as a tech class licensee. And if you just look through the beginning of the book there, it kind of breaks down on page 4 and 5 some of the nuances and privileges that are associated with each band with your new general class privileges. On page 7, there's another frequency guide. The topic is labeled the Considerate Operator's Frequency Guide. On page 9, there's a little bit more of ham history. Read through that book there. Some of the amateur service was restructured. If you look on page 11, back in 2000, some information for you there. It's a worthwhile read to get a little bit of the history and everything. Chapter 3 covers getting ready for the exam, talks a little bit about the question pool for the general class license. This is element 3. Technician class was element 2. This is element 3. And if you look on page 18, it kind of gives you a breakdown of what to expect for the question from the question pool. There are 462 total questions. You're only going to be given 35 questions to answer for the general class exam. And there's a breakdown in the little blue box there on page 18 of the book that kind of gives you an idea of how many of each topic is going to be covered in the exam. Not everybody's going to get the same exam. When you go in, there's a different exam for everybody, so you can't copy from the next person's sheet the answers, because more than likely it's going to be wrong if you do. So the rules and regulations, there's 5 exam questions for that. Operating procedures, there's 5 questions. Radio wave propagation, 3 questions. Amateur radio practices, 5. Electrical principles, 3. Circuit components, 2. Practical circuits, 3. Right there in that little section there, you have 8 questions dealing with matters of technical concern. The general class license really is more about operating, getting to know a little bit more about the rules and regs. There's less information regarding the principles of electrical theory and electronic theory and things like that, unlike the technician class, which has a little bit more, I think. That's just me. And if you want to go to the extra class license, that is really full of some electronic and electrical theory. But for the most part, the practical applications with the general class license has to do with, operating procedures, a little bit of propagation, understanding that, because when you get on HF, it's a good idea to understand and know what propagation is, how it's affected by nighttime and daytime hours. The MUF, or maximum usable frequency, is something you're going to probably hear as it relates to different bands and particular times of the day. Their signals and emissions, you got 3 questions there. Antennas and feed lines, there's 4 questions. And electrical and RF safety, again, this is pretty much common sense. There's 2 questions there. And if you move right along through here, it kind of gives you an idea of the questions and everything. Now we get into chapter 4. Let's see. No, it is still chapter 3 here, I think. Yeah, chapter 3 still covers. We actually get into the basics of the question pool, and we're going to get started on that here right away. There is a little bit more to know in the general class. I think I have enough classes scheduled to cover all the topics adequately. At least I hope so anyway. And there's a couple of them that are about 119, 112 slides. Stand by for a minute. Had to cough. But anyway, I'm going to try to cover 3 topics tonight. There is quite a few. Topic 1, again, is about the licensing, passing your exam and things of that sort. There's 13 slides for that. Topic 2 is 47 slides. Let's see. Let me get going here. There's topic 2 is going to be your new general bands, and topic 3 is FCC rules. I'm hoping we can cover all of these this evening. Time's a little short now that we've kind of got a delayed start. My apologies for not getting the, the link to you. But we'll go as far as we can tonight, and hopefully wrap up before 9 o'clock and get this taken care of. So at any rate, let's jump right into the topic that we're going to get into. Again, this follows along in your book. It's a tremendous help if you follow along with this in your book, because the answers are going to be right there anyway. So anyhow, when you pass your exam, your examiners will all sign a certificate of successful completion of examination, excuse me, or the CSCE, and it's valid for 365 days. Remember that. It's valid for 1 year, okay? You'll understand that a little bit as we go on here. Until your call sign appears on the Universal Licensing System database, you need to add the special identifier AG as a duly licensed tech class licensee. You can immediately, once you get that certificate, that CSCE, once you get that certificate, okay, you can begin to utilize and leverage your new privileges as a general class licensee. But it's very important that if you operate on those bands that are reserved for general class licensees, you need to make sure that you append at your call, on your call sign, at the end of your call sign, the identifier AG. It indicates that you've passed your exam, and it may not show up immediately in the FCC database, but you are letting everybody know that you are legal to operate within that band if somebody happens to look you up. And it's not unusual that if you get on an HF band, say you get on 20 meters, and you're talking to somebody, maybe on the other end of the continent here, and they look you up, and they're going to see right away that you're a tech class licensee until the FCC database license is updated. If you do not use the identifier AG. So just kind of remember that. Well, a blank page. All right. In 2014, the FCC issued a new rule that allows general, advanced, and extra class hams who have let their license expire by more than 2 years to regain their original license level by simply taking and passing the Tech Class Element 2 exam. Now, I know some people, I think there was at least one person in the Tech Class examination who had let their license expire for over 2-year period, and they were like a general or a extra class, whatever class license they were before that. All they had to do is take the Tech Class exam, and they are automatically uh, grandfathered in and allowed to regain their original license level, be it general, advanced, or extra. A previously licensed amateur radio operator may get back to their expired general class or higher license simply by passing the current Element 2 technician class exam. Just a repeat of what we just read. And you can see there the oops, go back. The references in the Part 97 of the FCC rules and regulations for the amateur uh, rules. Yeah, whatever. Sorry, getting a brain fart here. My apologies. All right. Once you pass your general class written examination, you're good to go on the air on all of the general class segments of the worldwide bands, plus your present Tech Class frequencies. So you're good to go there, as I explained earlier. All right, we're going to go ahead and just go through the little Q and A here real quick. It's going to be pretty rapid fire, and it shouldn't be any real issue as far as doing that. I'm going to go back over here. Hey, Cohen, how you doing? I'm glad to see you on there. You don't have to unmute your mic or anything. But I do need to go back to the text message in case somebody has questions or something, or you can unmute your mic and ask a question. That's fine too. All right, let's see here. How long is a certificate of successful completion of examination, the CSCE, valid for? And that's pretty easy. It's a year, 365 days. So that is the C is your correct answer there. When must you add the special identifier AG after your call sign if you're a Tech Class licensee and have a CSCE for general class operator privileges? But the FCC has not yet posted your upgrade on its website. Again, remember I told you that once you pass that, you have that CSCE, you are able to operate right away with that. You have to use a special identifier, though. Remember that one, too. Who may receive credit for the elements represented by an expired amateur radio licensee? Okay, again, we were talking about those who have expired beyond the 2-year limit. But the question or the answer to this question really is A. Any person who can demonstrate that they once held an FCC-issued general, advanced, or amateur class license that was not revoked by the FCC. So you can receive the credit for the elements. Again, what it's talking about here is if you go ahead and take 2 for the technician class, you can regain that if you had a valid license beforehand. So if a person has an expired license of general class or higher, what is required before you can receive a new license? Again, this has to do with passing Element 2 exam. It's just a very simple, basic, common sense thing. The applicant must pass the current Element 2 exam, and that's it. Answer is D. On which of the following band segments may you operate if you're a Tech Class operator and have a CSCE for general class privileges? Okay, again, you've passed it. You have your CSCE. you can begin operating right away on any general or tech class band segment. And that's all there is to it. Again, just common sense stuff here. All right. Let's see. Let me get rid of that. And I will stop sharing for just a moment. Does anybody have any questions, any comments they want? I mean, I'm going to continue right on here with this. Let's see. I got to bring up the other one. On to topic 2, if there's no questions or anything relating to what we just saw. I'll get this started in a moment. It's slow. See? There we go. All right. And we'll start this from the beginning. All right, here we go. All right, the new general bands. This is what we're going to cover now. There's 40 some slides, I think, on this. We'll kind of breeze through this a little bit. If you've been looking at the charts that you were given during the technician license class, you've had some time to look over those and kind of memorize a little bit what the general class bands are. Shouldn't be too difficult to you. Also, if you've taken advantage of the pre-study Q&A that comes with the book, if you happen to have that, that's a good thing to kind of give you a leg up on some of these answers and everything. If there's any material that anyone needs, please drop me a line. My email is Wayne at N3LMS, that's November 3 Lima Mike Sierra .net, N-E-T, net. And I will make available whatever you need up on Dropbox. I'll get you the link for that. I haven't put anything up there specific to the general class course at this time. Still, some of the stuff from the tech class license course is still applicable with this as well. But moving right along. So remember, we talked a little bit about, frequency and wavelength at the other class, for those of you who were in attendance here, and how to do that. Remember that magic number 300. If you want to know what the frequency is in meters, you just divide 300 by the frequency in megahertz to get the length of the wavelength in meters. Conversely, if you want to know the wavelength in meters or frequency, wavelength in meters, frequency, that is, divide wavelength in meters into 300 to get the frequency. It's been a long day for me. I started out with physical therapy today for my shoulder, and I haven't really slowed down all day, so I'm a little bit tired. Please forgive me. I don't mean to be so, but that's where I am right now. At any rate, the information is right here in this little blue square as far as frequency and wavelength conversions. General class has all frequency privileges on 160, 30, 17, 12, and 10 meters. And there are 5 channel privileges on 60 meters. You'll learn a little bit about 60 meters. That's in the 5 megahertz band, and they are channelized. There's specific power restrictions for those. And I don't know anybody that has a rig right now that even is capable of broadcasting or communicating on 60 meters. I certainly cannot unless I modify my radio. But 30, 17, 12, and 10 meters and 160 is wide open for your use as a general class licensee. When you get into like 80 and 40 meters and 20 meters, and 15, there are segments that are still set aside for those that have privileges with the advanced class and the extra class licenses. A general class operator, you receive all privileges from 28 to 29.7 on the 10-meter band. So all the choices that you have are correct for this particular question. One of the things to note on this little chart, however, and this is kind of interesting because I have used FM on 10 meters and used some FM repeaters for 10 meters. But that part on 29.5 megahertz to 29.7 megahertz is an FM or frequency modulation segment of the 10-meter band. There are 10-meter repeaters. You can look them up in the repeater directory. You can look them up online. When I lived in Sterling, Virginia, my buddy and I had a 10-meter repeater on the air. the Because the duplexers are so large and um, they're a little bit cumbersome, let's put it that way. Instead of having the transmit and receive uh, portions of the 10-meter channel at one location, I had the receive side and my buddy had the transmit side, and we had a UHF link. So people coming in on the receive side would broadcast out on a 440 simplex frequency over to the transmitter site and then broadcast out on 10 meters, 10 FM. Um, and it was quite interesting. We had a really good setup. We had to have that separation so that we didn't have what's called descents between the receive and the transmit, particularly because we didn't have the cans necessary, the duplexers necessary to tune that out and everything. You'll see that the first 300 kilohertz of the 10-meter band is for Morse code. And also notice too that this little yellow segment between the blue and that little dotted line, that is reserved for that's voice privileges for the tech class license, okay? However, everybody can use it, okay? And you'll notice a little green there above. If you're a novice or a tech class licensee, you're limited to 200 watts. As a general class licensee, you can run full power at 1500 watts across there. Novice and tech operators are restricted to 200 watts on high frequency bands. However, as a general class operator, you can run 1500 watts PEP. So I just told you that answer anyway. Any rate, for this particular question, I don't know exactly what it's referring to. It's perfectly legal to do, providing you stay at the control point of your station. Let me look and see what page that is on to see exactly what the reference is here. I need to find that out. G1E da 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 da. E2. Okay. When may a 10-meter repeater retransmit the 2-meter signal from a station having a tech class control operator? Okay. That's a control point. Okay. You have to stay at the control point of your station. You may never leave the relay station without a general class or higher control operator on active duty at the control point. We'll be looking at that question here in a little bit, I guess. All right, 12 meters. Just a very, very small segment of the 12-meter band here. You can run the legal limit of 1500 watts PEP. And there you see what the frequencies are. So it runs from 24,890 to 24,990. And you can see the portion that's kind of set aside for Morse code or CW and the rest for voice using upper sideband. The 15-meter band is at 21 megahertz or 21,000 kilohertz, depending on how you want to talk about it. So 21,300 is a great frequency for voice operations to regularly work the world in the morning and afternoon. Yeah, 15-meter band is quite an interesting band, particularly when you have the MUF times. You can pretty much work the world. Um, and it specifies morning and afternoon. And my first DX contact, I was a novice class operator at the time, was on 15 meters. And it happened to be almost completely around on the opposite side of the world from me. I talked to a guy named Roger in New Zealand, and that was about 5 o'clock in the morning. And the band was open for about, I don't know, about 20 minutes, I guess. We kind of went back and forth using Morse code. Really interesting contact. And that was, again, my first DX contact outside the continental US. So 15 meters it quickly became my favorite band because of that. But I have other favorite bands now. Remember that phone privileges for high frequency general class operation are those at the top of the band. Your 20-meter band voice privileges extend from 14,225 up to 14,350. And below that is, uh, well, there's a very small segment. You see that little red area there says you have no privileges. The 14.150 to 14.225 is reserved for those that have advanced or extra class license privileges. Um, so just so you know, when you get your extra class, you get some extra frequencies and they're less crowded. And honestly, if you're a DX chaser, um, you know, a lot of people, they wonder why they should get an extra class license since you really don't get a whole lot of privileges added to what you currently have. Well, the short answer to this is that you do get more privileges, and it's also where the greatest DX uh, happens to congregate. If you're a DX chaser and you're trying to get that worked all countries or, you know, DXCC award or whatever, work 100 countries, you're more likely to get those countries operating in those portions of the bands reserved for the extra class licensee. Do, 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 do. Oh, what did I do here? Must have hit something. Okay. Although you might be permitted to run an amplifier with 1500 watts output, always try to run the minimum power necessary to make contact with the other station. Again, this is something you learned in the tech class. Uh, Try to run the minimum power necessary to make a contact. Let me tell you, 99% of the contacts you make worldwide, no matter what, you can do with a barefoot station. And most of your ham stations these days come stock as a 100-watt radio. And literally, you can work the world with 100 watts in a wire antenna. And that's all I had. I had a wire antenna. I had an inverted V hung up on a tree behind my townhouse. I actually had a 75-watt transmitter, and I worked that guy down in New Zealand. I thought it was great. So I know it can be done. So the rule of thumb is always use the minimum power necessary to make your contact. As a new general, you can operate throughout the entire 30-meter band using CW and data emissions. That's the one thing about the 30-meter band. I don't get on it. Um, and there is an output limit of 200 watts because it is a shared band with other services. So no phone or voice activity is allowed on 30 meters. It all has to be CW or data, and your limitation is 200 watts. You cannot run 1500 watts on the 30-meter band. So image transmissions include popular slow scan television and facsimile. On 30 meters, image transmissions are prohibited. It's one of the data transmissions that you cannot put on 30 meters, the facsimile or slow scan TV. Part of that has to do with the fact that, again, 30 meters is a shared service. It's also a very small segment, and you don't want to splatter your signal across the entire band. So those are prohibited. On 30 meters, CW and data band only, 200 watts peak envelope power output is allowed in accordance with the FCC rules. 97.313, paragraph C, subsection 1. All right, welcome to 40 meters. Now, 40 meters is also a shared band. A lot of the shortwave broadcast stations, uh, I tell you, 40 meters back in the day when I was on it, was one of my most hated bands because of at nighttime, 40 meters would literally come alive at at nighttime, but you had to deal with the heterodynes of the AM broadcast stations on the other side of the pond, the pond being the Atlantic Ocean, because a portion of the 40 meters over there is set aside for shortwave broadcast stations and not for ham radio use. So you had to contend with that. Now, a lot of the shortwave stations have kind of gone by the wayside, and they are no longer um, as big of a problem. Okay. Is my sound still going? Okay, good. Thank you. All right. I saw your thing there, Colin. I guess you had to drop out and come back in order to get me. So, yeah, thanks for letting me know. And that was a little while ago. I didn't see it right away. My apologies. Okay. I guess I'm still going here, so I'm going to keep going. So on 40 meters, we recently gained an additional 50 kilohertz of voice spectrum. That was from 175 to 7,300 kilohertz lower sideband. So at any rate, you can find Gordon West on weekday mornings at 7250 within the general class portion of the 40-meter band. And you can see that from 7125 to 7175, there are no privileges for the general class licensee. Again, that's one of those segments reserved for the next higher class license. That's where all the DX hangs out. That's where you have less broadcast stations from the shortwave folks on the other side of the big pond. So here in the US, including Hawaii, we are in ITU Region 2. So this allows voice privileges as well as data and CW from 7175 to 7300 kilohertz or 7.3 megahertz for general class operators. But these privileges are only available in ITU Region 2. So if you head off to the South Seas into ITU Region 3, your 40-meter privileges will be different. They don't have that portion up there like we have. They have a very small segment of the 40-meter band, again, because of the shortwave broadcast stations. So here are your regions as it's set up. You can see that we are in region 2, along with Greenland and Canada and South America and Central America, and including Alaska here. Um, region 3, um, you can see who's in region 3 there and who has region 1. So Russia and Europe and Africa, the Scandinavian countries are all in region 1. Okay, the new 60-meter ham band is shared with a few government stations on a non-interference basis. They can interfere with us, but we cannot interfere with them. In other words, if you hear something official on one of those frequencies, you cannot operate. So ham operators are authorized to operate on 5 discrete channels, and you see them listed right there. And this is all upper sideband. Yep. You got a question?
Now, my internet's just fluctuating really badly. I keep losing you. I don't know what I did, but I just closed the screen out somehow. I
Okay.
just trying to get back in. That's all.
Okay. No problem. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. All right. So you can see what the specific channels are there, and you're limited to 100 watts ERP. Yeah, 60 meters is the only band where we've been assigned specific channel allocations, like CB or say, go to channel 1, good buddy. At any rate, that's what that is. The maximum bandwidth is 2.8 kilohertz, which is about the bandwidth of a sideband signal. So really, you should be okay. If you set your dial to the channel centers are 1.5 kilohertz higher. Um, so you need to set your frequency to read 5330.5 using upper sideband, and that will cover that area up there, which is 1.5 kilohertz higher on the upper side of those frequencies. Again, with your limitation of 2.8 kilohertz in bandwidth for an upper sideband signal, you should be okay to operate. Okay, the rules require a 60-meter band, 5-channel operation not to exceed 100 watts, effective radiated power out, measured on a dipole antenna. So, however, if you're transmitting using a beam antenna, you will need to turn your power output down to correspond with the amount of gain the beam exhibits. You then must note this in a station logbook and keep it as a permanent part of your station's written files. So this is where it's a good idea. And as a matter of fact, you really should keep your logbook as a necessity, uh, just so that you can cover yourself. So if you have an antenna that has, say, a 3 dB gain, uh, and you pump 50 watts into it, your effective radiated power is probably going to be about 100 watts. If you have if you have your transmitter at a full 100 watts and you have a 3 dB gain antenna, that antenna, the effective radiated power is going to be approximately 200 watts, not counting for any coax loss. So, really, to stay within the designated power limits according to the rules, you want to make sure that whatever gain antenna you use is offset by reducing the power on your transmitter inside where your station is. We kind of covered a little bit about 3 dB, 6 dB, and stuff like that, the gain equivalents and things of that sort back in the technician class. Okay, both our 30-meter and 60-meter bands are shared, and authorized government users always have priority. So change frequency or stop transmitting if there is a concern or somebody else using it that doesn't sound like a ham radio operator. And don't try to engage the government in a conversation. It won't work. Let's see. Both the 30 and 60-meter bands are shared, and authorized government users always have priority. So they are primary on the band, which means we must not cause harmful interference to government. Government. How they say it? Government. Government. 75 80-meter ham band is a good one for short range daytime communications and long range nighttime skywave signals. 80 meters refers to the bottom of the band for CW and data, and 75 meters refers to the top of the band for phone, which is around 3,900 kilohertz, and that's within the phone privileges for general class licensees. There again, you have that little chart at the bottom there that shows what you're allowed with voice and CW and where there are no privileges. General class CW and data privileges for the 80-meter band extend from 3525 kilohertz through 3600 kilohertz. So 3560 kilohertz is a good frequency for CW, RIDI or RTTY, and data. And I'll tell you from here, look at ARRL if you're really interested in getting into CW and get that Morse code thing down. W1AW at ARRL headquarters there in Newington, Connecticut, they have a schedule in which they do various speeds of CW for practice. They broadcast that out, and generally 80 meters is a good place to hear the W1AW signals, particularly in the evenings, which is really the time that they mostly do that stuff. But they have a schedule set up. So if you're interested in CW, you can go to ARRL's website, arrl.org, and look for the W1AW CW schedule. And if you want to get in on it, it's pretty interesting to listen to. I get on it once in a while just to kind of bring my CW skills back to life as much as possible. All right, you're a new general class operator. You're permitted to run up to 1,500 watts of peak envelope power output on all bands other than 60 meters and 30 meters. A little chart down there shows the 160-meter band, which extends from 1.8 megahertz or 1,800 kilohertz up to 2 megahertz. Again, we just kind of covered that, and I don't know why they're showing the 160-meter, well, the 160-meter band, but they are. Again, it's a lower side band to use. All right, again, you have your band plan charts, and you can see where your privileges begin and end. Voice privileges, or phone as they call it on all bands, are always at the top of the band. In other words, it's at the upper end of the band. I don't know why they use the word top. It's the upper end of the band. It's not at the lower end of the band, and it kind of shows you there where it is. Your 75 80 meter band runs from 3.5 megahertz up to 4 megahertz. And for the general class licensee, you have single sideband on the lower sideband only phone privileges from 3,800 to 4 megahertz. And they have a little reference there to 20 meters as well. Most high frequency bands have a spot where stateside hams will call and listen only for foreign country DX stations. For example, 1830 to 1850 kilohertz in the 160 meter band has long been recognized as the DX window for that band no idle chit-chatting here. One of the things about the 160 meter, we'll get into antennas a little later on, but in order to achieve a long distance on 160 meters, the antenna has to be up there rather high, generally at least a half wavelength in height in order to get really effective long distance communications on the 160-meter band. So if you really want to know what that is, you can use 468, divide 468 by the frequency in megahertz, and it gives you the length, the half wave length of not only how long the antenna is to be, but the suggested height above ground it should be for the most effective communications long distance. The lower it is to ground, the more near vertical um, instance you're going to get. It's going to literally broadcast up and down. It's going to reflect off the ionosphere, and it's going to reflect down to closer in stations. My 160-meter antenna, just to give you an idea, and we shouldn't really get too far off topic here. 160-meter antenna I have um, is not a half wave above ground. The feed point is about 24 feet off the ground, and that's way lower, which makes it a more of a vertical bounce off the ionosphere, close-in communication type antenna. And it runs roughly, the length of the antenna runs roughly slightly east of north to slightly west of south. Um, and because it does reflect, it literally broadcasts, the signal goes up into the ionosphere and comes down close by. Uh, there's a group up in New York and New Jersey. And again, they're on the long end of the end of the antenna where I shouldn't be able to actually send a signal, but because it does operate near vertical bounce off the ionosphere, I have good signals from several people up in New York and New Jersey, and even into Canada, and then down to South Carolina. You know, those are off the ends of the antenna, but it's really not broadcasting off the end. Again, it's reflecting off the ionosphere. Now, if I had it up higher, I would get more of an east-west type of trajectory of my signal. We'll get into antennas a little bit later on. Okay, we're going to get into the question pool. What time is it? It's 2010. Yeah, we'll be able to get this and topic number 3 in tonight. No problem. So the general class license holder has the following bands for amateur frequency privileges. And when you look at this, you actually have gained 160. You got to remember you have 160. Let's see, 60, 30, 17, 12, and 10. Okay. Yeah, kind of pay attention to this question. It's all amateur frequency privileges. You do not have all frequency privileges on 80 meters, on 40 meters, or on 15, or on 20 meters. You do not have all the privileges on those 4 bands. You do have all the privileges as a general class licensee on 160, 60, 30, 17, 12, and 10. Just kind of lock that in your brain right there. So if you see 15 in it, that's a wrong answer. If you see 40, that's a wrong answer. If you see 80, that's a wrong answer. If you do not see 160, that's a wrong answer. So C is the correct answer here on this question. So which of the following frequencies is available to a control operator holding a general class licensee? Remember, you get 28.20, 29. This is the 10-meter band. You have all the privileges of the 10-meter band, so all these choices are correct. So which of the following is a limitation on transmitter power on the 28 megahertz band for a general class licensee control operator? Again, you have all that power, 1500 watts. If you want to invest in an amplifier, by all means, go right ahead. I have a 600 watter, and that's more than enough for me, and I don't use it all that often. When may a 10-meter repeater retransmit a 2-meter signal from a station having a tech class control operator? Um, when may a 10-meter repeater retransmit the 2-meter signal from a station having a technician class control operator? Okay. We're talking about a 10-meter repeater here. So you need to have the 10-meter repeater control operator holds at least a general class licensee, because a tech class doesn't have that privilege on 10 meters, although they do have the privileges on 2 meters. The 2-meter signal, in order for it to be rebroadcast, you have to have at least a general class license for 10-meter repeater control. So what is the maximum transmitting power an amateur station may use on the 12-meter band? Okay, good one, Cohen. Yeah. 12-meter band. Okay. Again, you've got that 1500 watt thing going. So, yeah, C is correct. Which of the following frequencies is within the general class portion of the 15-meter band? You know, as you can pursue this, you begin to excuse the noise there. I'm trying to adjust the microphone. Um, you just kind of know visually and in your mind, you have a little mental acuity, and you can kind of memorize this by rote. The 15-meter band being 21 megahertz, so 21,300 is, or C is the correct answer here. Which of the following frequencies is within the general class portion of the 20-meter phone band? So I automatically know. I mean, you could take and divide 20 meters by divided into 300, and you come up with something like 14,305. So that's within the general class portion. Something to note here, D is wrong because the upper limit of the 20-meter phone band, or the 20-meter band, is 14,350. So 14, answer D was grossly wrong, and A and B are kind of down there in the CW portion. So which of the following limitations apply to transmitter power on every amateur band? Okay, which of the following limitations apply to transmitter power on every amateur band? Okay. Again, we've talked about this. It's the minimum power necessary to carry out the desired communications should be used. Okay. Now, this isn't a hard and fast rule. Just kind of keep this in mind. This is not a rule. To it, it's a recommendation more than anything. So it's not so much a limitation as it is good operating practice. Let's put it that way. So by using the minimum power necessary, you reduce the um, occurrences of splatter across the band and interfering with other stations on the band, maybe not that far away on the dial. So using the least amount of power is always a good operating mantra to kind of hold on to. On which of the following bands is phone operation prohibited? Well, 30 meters, again, is that band that's reserved for CW and data. So which of the following bands is image transmission prohibited? Again, 30 meters. You don't want to do image transmission or facsimile on 30 meters. It is, again, a shared band with government, and they have priority. What is the maximum transmitting power an amateur station may use on 10.140 megahertz? 10.140 megahertz is that 30-meter band, and there is a specific limitation you have to stay within. You can't run 1,500 watts. You're only limited to 200 watts on that band. So which of the following frequencies is in the general class portion of the 40-meter band? This is one of those things, knowing that the 7 megahertz band is the 40-meter band. This one is really easy because the upper limit of the 40-meter band is 7.3 megahertz. And the only other choice there is 7.250. So your answer is A. If you know what the upper limit is for this question, you got this one made. So in what ITU region is operation in 7.175 to 7.300 megahertz band permitted for a control operator holding an FCC-issued general class license? Which ITU region are we in? We are in region 2. Which of the following amateur bands is restricted to communication on only specific channels rather than frequency ranges? Again, there's that 5 megahertz portion, which is the 60-meter band. That's the channelized frequencies. There's 5 channels, and I hold up 4 fingers. There's 5 channels in the 60-meter band. 60 meters is the only channelized restricted band for amateurs to use. Again, we're secondary to that as well. What is the maximum bandwidth permitted by FCC rules for the amateur radio stations when transmitting on USB frequencies in the 60-meter band? Again, that upper sideband signal is only going to be about 2.8 to 3 kilohertz wide, but your limitation is A, 2.8 kilohertz. So which of the following is required by the FCC rules when operating in the 60-meter band? Has nothing to do with third-party traffic. It doesn't really tell you to list any stations that you worked, although when you have a logbook, that's information that you want to keep for yourself. You don't care about the manufacturer of your equipment or the antenna used. What the FCC rules are concerned with is if you're using something other than a dipole antenna. A dipole antenna being unity gain, in other words, 50 watts in, 50 watts out, 100 watts in, 100 watts out. If you have a gain antenna, that's what the FCC wants to know. Keep a record of your gain antenna. You have a beam antenna where it's a 3 dB gain, 100 watts in, 200 watts out. You're automatically breaking the rules there because your limitation is 100 watts on the 60-meter band. So you want to note that you put 50 watts into your antenna, 3 dB gain, 100 watts out, thereabouts approximately. So what is the appropriate action if, when operating on either the 30 or 60-meter bands, a station in the primary service interferes with your contact? What is the appropriate action? Well, remember who actually has the priority authorization to use those frequencies. So we have no other recourse but to either stop transmitting or move to another frequency. D is your answer. Which of the following applies when the FCC rules designate the amateur service as a secondary user on a band? Again, it has to do with who has priority. And when you look at all the answers there, the only one that comes to mind that seems to be appropriate is amateur stations are allowed to use the band only if they do not cause harmful interference to primary users, being the government. All right, let's see, where am I? Which of the following frequencies is within the general class portion of the 75-meter band? Remember, 75 meters is that voice portion of what we call really generically as the 80-meter band, and it runs from 3,500 kilohertz to 4,000 kilohertz. So if you look there, D is definitely wrong because 4,000 is the upper limit, and 3,750 that is kind of like down in other portions. So this one might confuse a few people. And you know that 1875 is in the 160-meter band. So the only correct answer here is 3,900 kilohertz, 3.9 megahertz in the 75-meter band. Which of the following frequencies is within the general class portion of the 80-meter band? Again, we're talking about 80 meters here. And this has to do with CW, or the CW portion, not the phone portion. We're in the 80-meter band portion of the 3.5 to 4 megahertz. So when you look at this, you know that 3650 isn't going to be it, but 3560 is going to be it. Don't transpose that. They put 3650 in there to confuse you on this question. We're talking about the 80-meter band, not the 75-meter band. So which of the following is a limitation on the transmitter power on the 1.8 megahertz band? All right. Again, it's your general class privileges to operate for 1,500 watts PEP. So D is your correct answer. When the general class licensees are not permitted to use the entire voice portion of a particular band, which portion of the voice segment is generally available to them? Let's kind of read that again. When the general class licensees are not permitted to use the entire voice portion of a particular band, which portion of the voice segment is generally available to them? Now, remember, when it talks about the top of the band, we're talking about the upper region of the entire band. So really the upper frequency end is the general class portion. You get a little lower than that. And again, you have to look at your chart to kind of get familiar with what the lower end of the general class portion is. And below that is where your advanced and extra class licensees are operating as far as the phone portions of those bands are concerned. We're getting along to about 8:30 here. I don't think we're going to be able to get the other topic in this evening. So what is the DX window in a voluntary band plan? What is the DX window in a voluntary band plan? Okay. When you look at this, FCC, I mean, when you're talking voluntary band plan, you're not talking about an FCC rule. So automatically you can get rid of those questions that have to pertain to the FCC rule. Okay. And then you get down to look at D here, a portion of the band that has been voluntarily set aside for digital contacts only. We're talking DX. We're not talking about digital contacts. So the only answer here that's really makes any sense is A. It's a portion of the band that should not be used for contacts between stations within the 48 contiguous United States. DX window is when you're talking about DX, you're talking about stations outside the US. And like I mentioned earlier, my first DX contact, the first contact outside the contiguous United States, again, was New Zealand. So, European stations or, South America, Africa, Russia, wherever. Okay. Those are all DX contacts that you would be making. So that's your DX window. Any portion of the band that should not be used for contacts between stations within the 48 contiguous United States. Again, it's voluntary. All right. That kind of brings us right to the end here. And since let's see, there's 36 slides in that next topic. And the next topic being is covering the FCC rules. We'll get into that. Okay. I'm a little sluggish here on my computer. Oh, geez. I don't know why this thing's doing this. But at any rate, I think that's all what we're going to cover this evening. And kind of wondering if anybody has any questions, anything they want to discuss. I stopped sharing. Why isn't my camera coming up? I don't know what's going on with my camera here. Hello, camera. What are you doing? All right. Well, you're not going to see my lovely face. So I guess my camera doesn't want to work. Oh, there it is. All right. So if you don't have any questions, you can turn on your mics now and we can talk. I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast, and we'll pick up tomorrow evening with the other topics.